I'm Shan, and this is Life with Shan. Today's video is going to be a book summary, recap, whatever you want to call it, of Daisy Jones and the Six. Essentially, I'm rereading it so you don't have to right before the show comes out or you go to watch the show. The show for Daisy Jones and the Six is going to be live on Amazon Prime starting March 3rd, 2023. At the time of filming is tomorrow, and I am so excited. The fictional album from Daisy Jones and the Six that was made into a real album for the show is now live on Spotify, everything. I've been listening to that all day. I'm loving it. My vinyl for it comes in tomorrow, and I cannot wait to make this whole show this weekend my entire personality. Well, back to the summary recap. Moving forward, there are going to be spoilers for everything. I'm going to essentially retell you the story in a shorter, easier way than having to audiobook or physically read it again. A little recap background of Daisy Jones and the Six is that this book is told in a series of interviews, transcripts, all from an unknown narrator author that is told later on in the story. It starts with Daisy Jones and explains that she is very wealthy, glamorous. She grew up with parents who were kind of all over the place. They were true hippies and didn't raise her the way you would normally be raised nowadays. Daisy is beautiful and free-spirited and does whatever she wants, and she befriends a woman named Simone, who is an older disco star, very popular, much more popular than Daisy is at the time of the beginning of the story. Daisy and Simone then party together. Simone ends up convincing Daisy to become part of the music industry, and she gets a music manager named Hank Allen, who becomes her manager and then eventually her boyfriend for a short period of time. She starts singing with Runner Records. Kind of meanwhile, in Pittsburgh, there are these two brothers, the Dune brothers, named Billy and Graham Dune, who are left behind by their father when they're very young, and essentially all they have is a guitar from him. So they start creating a band. They go from singing and making music, just the two of them. They add people to the band periodically, and then they eventually get a gig at a wedding, and their father ends up being a guest at that very wedding, and he doesn't say anything to them, not to either Billy or Graham or anything to the band in general. At this point, the band consists of Billy and Graham Dune. They also have Warren Rhodes, who is their drummer, their bassist Pete Loving, and their rhythm guitarist Eddie, along with Karen as their keyboard. Then they have a manager and now producer Teddy Price, and they also sign with Runner Records. So that's kind of how their worlds collide. Now we'll go into a more detailed recap now that you have a background of who is who a little bit. You start off the entire book learning about Daisy Jones the groupie from 1965 to 1972. That's one of the first chapters. She was born in 1951 in Hollywood Hills, aka Los Angeles. Her parents, like I said, are kind of out there. They don't do too much for her, but they're wealthy. They are well-known painters and a model. She is rich and she does whatever she wants because her parents don't pay attention to her. She at one point loses her virginity to a random drummer, and then she ends up meeting Simone, who, like I said, introduces her to the music industry. She gets Hank Allen as her music manager, and the next chapter goes into the rise of the Six, which is 1966 to 1972. The Dune brothers, which later on as they add people to their band call themselves the Six. And one big thing in the book is that they kind of thought that sounded cool because it also sounded like the sect, and some of them were like, oh, we didn't say that at all. Others were like, oh no, it's definitely implied. It was so cool. So you have that little background of the story. Throughout the time in the band, when they're becoming the Six between 1966 and 1972, they have a member of the band named Chuck, and unfortunately Chuck gets pulled into the draft and he dies at battle. When they kind of inherit or adopt Karen, the new keyboardist. Karen is new and Graham has a crush on Karen. They slowly become a couple. They change the band name to the Six, and they get a new manager, Rod Reyes. Rod Reyes kind of convinces the band to move to California, so then Billy and Camila break up. They end up meeting the producer Teddy Price, who introduces them to Rich Palantino, which offers them a record deal with Runner Records, and then Billy proposes to Camila. So they go from broken up, they get a record deal, and Billy proposes to Camila. This is very on trend for 70s rock and roll stars. The next chapter is called It Girl. We go from 1972 to 1974, and we follow Daisy quite a bit in this chapter. She starts writing pieces of song every now and then Hank Allen, her manager, ends up becoming romantically involved with her. Signs with Runner Records, as I previously said for the quick recap. The Runner Records do not like her songs, and they don't move forward with her songs, and they tell her that she needs to start singing other people's songs and and she gets hysterical. She's devastated. She never wanted to sing someone else's song. She always wanted to sing the ones that she wrote. She doesn't know where to start. From there, she feels kind of stuck and trapped a little bit. The next chapter's debut goes from 1973 to 1975. The Six start working on an album while they live in Los Angeles, California, where they then meet Artie Snyder, their sound engineer. Billy grows obsessive and controlling. He needs to take care of every single thing. He's acting as though it's his own individual work. It's not a shared thing. It's his own. He is the oldest of the Dune brothers, so he kind of feels as though he started this band from the ground up, which is rightly so. But there's not like an elected leader or anything. It's a shared group of the Six, and Billy kind of takes a little too much control of it, and he is becoming obsessive and controlling. Billy is also the most talented. They start to release the album, and they're ready to go on tour, and right before they go on tour, Camila pulls Billy aside and tells him that she is pregnant. They decide to get married because Billy is all in. He wants to make it clear that if he is going to have a kid, they're going to have a family the right way, in his opinion and eyes. So he goes all in, and he marries Camila right away, right before the tour. They get ready to have the baby. However, after their very first show on tour, Billy ends up getting high, and he cheats on Camila. And that's not the last time he cheats on Camila, sadly. Camila then decides to surprise him at a show and catches him cheating on her. He then starts to spiral even more. He starts to do heroin. Camila has baby Julia, and she tells Billy and the band, like, no, he's not meeting Julia. He has two choices. He either comes in here and says he will not use ever again, or goes to rehab. There's no option for him to run away. There's no option for him not to be part of this family. These are his two options. You go, Camila. You know what you need in life. You know what you want, and you're willing to make it happen without sacrificing too much of yourself and what you want to do for your child. I was very impressed by Camila's character at this point. After just giving birth to Julia, having her husband show up to see the baby while he is high, and just putting her foot down. That's hard to do, especially when you just gave birth and you have all these emotions going on. So Billy chooses to go to rehab. Billy tries to get clean, and then at the end of this chapter, Pete introduces the band to his now girlfriend, Jenny. Meanwhile, it's 1974 to 1975. Simone is on top of the dance charts and goes on tour. Simone is Daisy's friend from the very beginning. Daisy is refusing to record because she feels like she's not going to do her own song. She's not going to do anything. The record, which is Real Teddy, is threatening to sue Daisy because she's not producing any music and her album is completely unfinished. And then at the end of this chapter, we find that that song First is released by Daisy. After the song First comes out, Daisy becomes a little bit more popular, and naturally Teddy for the Six, who ends up being the same Teddy for Daisy, suggests that the Six gets a female lead singer and recommends Daisy Jones. How we end up here, I mean, is pretty obvious. Daisy does a trial, the band likes her, she does start to recommend tips to tweak one of their songs, Honeycomb, and Billy kind of loses it. He's really upset. I mean, Billy was the older brother when the band started, so he kind of feels as though he created this whole thing and it's still solely his. He is not adapted to sharing it with a group. It's not helpful, it's not mature, it leads to a lot of problems, this being the first of many. But he does feel out of control, especially with Daisy coming in and this outsider tweaking his songs. The next is the number tours from 1976 to 1977. Honeycomb ends up being a hit. The Six goes on tour without Daisy, and they do really well. Then one night Daisy joins them on tour and she sings Honeycomb with them, and the crowd goes wild. The record label then suggests that Daisy become an opener for the band on tour. There you go, more of the band. She's on tour with them, she's their opener. They still do their set for the Six after Daisy. At this point, Karen and Graham are now getting together. However, during one of the show, Daisy's jerk boyfriend at the time, Hank, which was also her manager, shows up at the show and Daisy dumps him. Then Hank gets the whole band to walk out on Daisy. At the next show, the Rolling Stones are at the next show, so Eddie agrees to accompany Daisy on stage. Billy grabs Eddie's guitar and sings with Daisy, and then she joins the Six for some of their songs. Billy ends up being upset about this. Again, the whole outsider coming in. Billy doesn't like not having control or being able to give approval for things beforehand, so he kind of loses it here. The Rolling Stones end up giving Daisy Jones and the Six the cover and suggests that they should add Daisy to the cover because it was initially just the Six. The Six like the idea, but Billy does not like the idea as anticipated. Daisy lets the Six know that she would like to help with some of the songs and writing them and producing them. The record label suggests that they now go by Daisy Jones and the Six because they've been doing so well together as a group. Now for 1977 to 1978, this chapter is called Aurora. Karen and Graham are now a couple, but they're not telling the band, and they do tell Camila, and Camila says, "Do not hurt Graham." Daisy and Billy then work together to write the song called Aurora. However, while it does go well, Daisy calls Billy out for using all of his songs that he writes about to be about apologies to his wife, and then Billy says, "Well, all of your songs, your drug addiction." Well, they're not wrong, either of them. Daisy misses a recording session, then Rod and Billy go to check up on her and find that she got so trashed the night before at a party that she ended up coming back, crashing and cutting her foot on glass. This then inspires Billy to write the song Impossible Women about it. Daisy has a hard time getting the song right and is on the brink of giving up about singing the song. However, she finally does get it right and she's proud of herself for it. They continue writing songs together, Daisy and Billy, and they find that they produce songs well together. However, she's still a little flaky. Meanwhile, all this is going on. Graham then pitches a song to Billy that Graham wrote, and Billy rejects it, as Billy does, because if he doesn't do it, it's not good, apparently, for Billy. So Graham sells it to someone else and it ends up being a top hit. Good for Graham. As the album starts to get put together, they all are doing really well. The label gets excited and they start picking a big release date. Daisy ends up going to kiss Billy and Billy pulls away. Daisy writes a song about it. The band loves the song. They want to put it on the album against Billy's wishes. And they end up making the cover for the album, and the cover ends up really being solely Daisy and Billy. Everyone's kind of in the background. It's mostly just Daisy and Billy, so that does create some tension there. Once that album is done, Billy and Teddy work together to finalize the songs. Meanwhile, Daisy runs off to a different country and meets this prince. This is so ridiculous, but so Daisy Jones. She ends up marrying him. Simone is supposed to meet her and supposed to hang out, but then Simone finds her after searching for her and figures all this out and then drags her back home, because what else are you supposed to do? Come on, Daisy. A few weeks later, the Six get together to listen to the album because Daisy isn't there. The album is really good, but a few members such as Eddie are angry that there were so many changes to the album that weren't brought forward beforehand. Then Daisy comes back a day late. There's a lot of tension between the group. Everyone's on edge. Everyone's kind of angry at each other, and coincidentally, the Rolling Stones is there to do another article, and they write about how much the band members hate each other. It only builds the mystique of the album and gets everyone interested in them and excited for the tour and the album. After the meeting, Pete tells Eddie that he's going to be marrying Jenny and he'll be leaving the band after this tour is over. Now, for the Aurora World Tour from 1978 to 1979, on tour, Daisy and Billy have separate buses entirely, finding that line of tension right then and there, every drive to every new city. Nikki, Daisy's now husband, comes with her on the tour and continuously encourages her to do drugs. One day, she then wakes up in a shower because Nikki thought she had overdosed, and all she can think is, "You thought I overdosed, so you put me in the shower instead of taking me to the hospital? No, this is not who I want to be with. You should have taken me to the hospital." She leaves the hotel and tells the front desk to leave a note for him saying that she wants a divorce, and that's it. She just walks out on Nikki. Good for her. He now is starting to try and get sober. Meanwhile, Karen is pregnant. She doesn't want a kid, but Graham does, and they end up arguing over it, and it's a huge decision, but Karen decides that she's going to get an abortion. Now that Nikki is gone, Daisy and Billy are getting along much better. There's not that tension and jealousy in the air anymore. The record Aurora becomes record of the year. The band then goes on SNL, and Daisy realizes she is in love with Billy. Then Billy realizes that he also has a thing for Daisy, but Camila, his wife and mother of his child, is who he really wants in life. Daisy tells Billy that she wants to get sober and clean, but unfortunately, Teddy then dies from a heart attack, and it really derails Daisy's plan to get sober and clean. Now, at Chicago Stadium, July 12, 1979, the band performs They play a great show. However, afterwards, Karen and Graham then get into a fight. Camila and Julia, who is Billy's daughter, are both at this show at the Chicago Stadium, and all Daisy can see is how much Billy loves them. And she ends up spending her night crying on her hotel room floor because she doesn't have that, and she wishes she did. But unfortunately, that night as well, Billy ends up falling off the wagon and starts to drink at the hotel bar, just from all the mixed feelings he's experiencing. It's not until someone asks him, "Do you have a kid?" that he then stops drinking. At this point, again, this whole book is told through a series of interviews, and we don't know the narrator until right now, when the unnamed narrator or author comes out and says that they're Julia. At this point in the story, Julia is 5 years old. However, Julia then writes in the book about how Daisy, Camila, and Julia then had a conversation, and Camila kind of sat Daisy down and said, "Look, you need to get clean. You need to leave the band. This is not good for you. You need to set boundaries. You need to get healthy." And Camila is the queen of boundaries with what she did when Billy was using the night that Julia was born. She's amazing. This woman is a boss. And back at the bar, Billy realizes that he needs to choose between the band or his family because the band is really driving him to use again, and he chooses his family. This is essentially the end of Daisy Jones and the Six. And the next day, Daisy officially leaves a note saying that she's out, and she flies out. That's it. The rest of the tour is canceled. Now you get kind of almost an epilogue. It's a then and now, 1979 to present day. So here is what the band members got up to. Daisy gets clean, starts writing, starts traveling, and adopts a bunch of kids. He is happy with Jenny, and he declines to be interviewed any other portion of the book. That's why we don't see him in there too much. Warren, Bob is married and sells real estate. Graham marries someone else, has kids. Simone marries a musician who is way more successful. Eddie becomes a record producer. Aaron continued with music throughout the 90s and then retired. Billy is happy, but he is still very sad that Camila passed away from lupus about 5 years ago. Then at the very end of the book, you get a chapter called One Last Thing, November 5th, 2012. This is a written letter from Camila to her daughter Julia, who's also kind of the author of the interview portions of this whole book. She's the character who pieced it all together for the history of Daisy Jones and the Six. So you have a letter from Camila, who recently passed away from lupus, to her daughter Julia. It essentially says, "Give your dad some time, but then tell him to call Daisy Jones." And that's it. That's Daisy Jones and the Six. And I don't know. I loved it. I hope you guys like this recap. I hope if you read it, you loved it. If you're gonna watch the show, I hope you love it. It's something else. It's a special book. Thank you for watching. If you like other recaps, if you want to see a few more, like, comment, subscribe what recaps you want. I'm happy to read almost anything these days. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great day.